All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. This is Tyler King, the college sports reporter for the Denver Gazette, back for another Colorado Buffaloes game preview. And it is week 4. The Buffs are 1-2 after a very disappointing loss at Houston in the Big 12 opener last Friday night, which obviously I did a video on the field after that game. If you missed it, make sure to go back and check that out. And as always, before we get started here today, make sure to like this video, comment, let me know what you guys are thinking about this week's game and just in general about this Buffs team, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to never miss an episode. We're doing, at least 2 videos every week, previewing the game, recapping each game, and then, if need be, getting some experts on to really break down this Buffs team in depth, because it's going to be an interesting game. And we are back talking once again about the opponent. This will be the weekly thing going forward. Obviously, the Delaware game, we spent mostly talking about the Buffs because wasn't really much to talk about with Delaware, because if they didn't play that well, it would have been all about the Buffs anyway. But this week's game, with it being a local-ish opponent, kind of with Wyoming, a team that Colorado hasn't played, too often in the last couple of decades, but has a lot of historical ties to. It's a very interesting game for the Buffs against a Mountain West opponent that isn't, Air Force or Colorado State, obviously the two in-state rivals, but just 100 miles away is Wyoming up in Laramie, and it should be a fascinating game at 8:15 p.m. We got back-to-back games now with this late night ESPN kickoff this week, and then next week against BYU, also at Folsom Field, to be at that same time. So get ready for some late nights, these next 2 Saturdays up in Boulder. But they're here obviously to talk about this week's game against Wyoming, and to do so, we've got Alex Taylor from YO Sports, who covers the Cowboys better than anybody. Alex, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and looking forward to talking about this game this weekend.
For sure, Tyler. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, let's. I want to start by breaking down, or just going over some of the numbers, because I mean this is the first meeting for the Buffs and Cowboys since 2009. It's only the 5th time they've played since 1975. Obviously, they've played close to 30 times throughout their histories, but a lot of that was back when they were in the early 20th century, when they were in the same conference and everything. Just does it feel like this is a game that should be played more often? I mean, with how close they are, there's not a lot of teams on the Front Range and within driving distance for either program. It feels like in today's era of college sports, where every dollar and cent counts, these games could become more valuable to the programs.
For sure, and I think I've been kind of blessed with a unique situation since I've been here. This is my 4th season covering Wyoming, and they had BYU here last year. They had Utah here, obviously, last week, and now they're going to play Colorado. So those are 3 kind of Power 4 opponents that are really right in your backyard, that I think if people weren't so hesitant to come to Laramie, like obviously Colorado would never come to Laramie, but that would be, you would think that you look at Wyoming's schedule, like would you rather play you in Boulder or go play Yukon in Connecticut or go play Central Michigan in Mount Pleasant? So I think this is, like Wyoming coach Jay Salvo kind of talked about at Mountain West Media Days, like these are good regional matchups that should be played more often, just when you consider the fan bases. I mean, this is a drivable game for obviously both fan bases. I mean, it's already sold out. And I just think that going forward, especially with conference realignment and everything, you just never know what's going to happen. But I think this is a matchup that kind of is a little more exciting to people that live in this area.
Yeah, for sure. And, obviously Colorado's non-conference schedule, I think it's filled out through 2029. And they've got a couple, they don't have a Rocky Mountain Showdown on the books until 2029. But, going forward the next 15 years or so, it's not going to be like an annual thing for the Buffs and Colorado State to be playing each other. So I feel like every year that Colorado doesn't play Colorado State, I feel like Wyoming should be on the schedule. That just kind of makes sense to me, because it's tough to get Buffs coaches on board with playing Air Force. That's just not a desirable non-conference game you want to put yourself through. So Wyoming just could be like an easy game to put on the schedule if you're not playing CSU every year. Just kind of get that Mountain West opponent on there. That's kind of regional as well. Like you said, it'll be a great crowd this weekend with a lot of fans on both sides. I'm sure will be inside Folsom Field. I think it'll be a good atmosphere and good environment for this week's game, for a nice regional matchup here. But like you said, I wanted to recap a little bit from Wyoming's game last week against Utah. Obviously, the Cowboys were 2-0 to start the year, going on the road, beating Akron, beating FCS Northern Iowa in week 2, and then it was a pretty close game for the first half, at least for Wyoming, and then Utah pulls away to win 31-6. Obviously, I'm sure after the first 2 games, that was a game where you were going to learn a lot about Wyoming. What did you learn kind of about this team on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, I think all the coaches and players kind of mentioned. I mean, obviously this was kind of their measuring stick game. Obviously, we all know the historical struggles of Akron the last couple of years, and obviously an FCS opponent at home. So you don't really. There was still a lot of question marks going into this game, but then I think a big piece for me is like, I mean, I know you're asking about Wyoming, but I feel like Utah kind of proved how good they are in this matchup, and I think that's kind of lost in all of, like, you look at the final score, you look at how much Wyoming's offense struggled, and it's like that is the best defense that Wyoming will see this year. So I almost feel like we're talking about a measuring stick, but I almost feel like that's an unfair measuring stick of like, you're not going to face a defense like that in the Mountain West. So obviously going to Boulder here, I feel like this is a better matchup for them, just in terms of seeing where they're at. 'Cause, I mean, obviously you look at their game against Utah, the offense was terrible. I mean, it was 3-0 at halftime, and I'm sure Utah fans weren't happy at halftime when they're going 3-0. They missed 2 field goals, had another one blocked. But I really think, just takeaways wise, I mean, the offense has to be better, and I'm curious. Colorado right now, I mean, obviously Georgia Tech is an option offense, but they have one of the worst rushing defenses in the country right now. So kind of curious if, coming off of how poor Wyoming threw the ball last week against Utah, if that's kind of a point of emphasis of, hey, we're just going to kind of get back to our old ways of Wyoming football, just running the ball and playing good defense, and kind of see if Colorado is able to stop that. I think that's kind of where I'm going with this.
Yeah, it should be interesting because, Colorado's defense has not been good really in any respect throughout these first 3 games. Georgia Tech obviously is proven to be an even better team than maybe people expected before the season. I was pretty high on them, and I picked Colorado to lose that game. I thought they would lose by more than they did, but whether it was Georgia Tech on the ground in week 1, I mean, Delaware had over 300 passing yards in week 2, and Houston had a really balanced attack. It seems like whatever the opposing offense would like to do, that they're able to do in a given game. And I think Wyoming, with 3 guys right now that have already over 100 rushing yards this year, some good averages per carry for all those guys as well. I think that could be a really good test for this Buffs defense as well, going up against a unit that they respect in Wyoming. Said how physical they are up front. It should be an interesting battle. I mean, do you feel like Wyoming has not just up front on the O-line, but the guys in the backfield has the horses, so to speak, to, no pun intended, to take it to this Buffs defense?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more of Samuel Harris. He's a true freshman running back. He just won Mountain West Freshman of the Week. I mean, it was kind of I don't want to say garbage time, but it was kind of came later in the game. He had a 28-yard run. He ended up with 68 yards, averaged like 8.5 yards a carry. And he's more like Sam Scott's kind of their power through the tackles running back. Like Samuel Harris is going to get to the outside and outrun guys. And I'd be shocked if he's not getting double-digit carries really this game, and then really moving forward through the rest of the season, because him and Teron Kelman have proven to be those outside break-a-long run backs, where Sam Scott's more of the consistent 4 or 5 yards right up the middle and get a first down or whatever it is.
And what should we expect from Caden Anderson this week? Because obviously there was a lot of talk about his struggles in that Utah game. I know Chris Durr has had a really good start to the season at wide receiver, and you've got an all-conference caliber guy at tight end with John Michael Gillenborg. I just kind of should either of those guys worry the Buffs defense at all? Is that something that Wyoming could use to attack this defense?
Yeah, I think Chris Durr is kind of proven to be, I don't want to say matchup proof, but you kind of look at, I mean, he had 5 catches against Utah, and he was really the only wide receiver that was getting open. And like I said, I mean, that's going to be the best defense that they see this year, probably. So I would be shocked if Chris Durr is not in the conversation for, I mean, probably leading the team in receiving. And then I'm curious if Gillenborg is a full go. He took a helmet to the thigh against Utah, left the game in the second quarter. Jay Salvell said he expects him to play, but who knows? I mean, what his role will be. He's kind of gotten bitten by some injuries, but if he's in there, that's kind of I've talked to Caden Anderson plenty about it. I mean, it's kind of a pick your poison type thing where you kind of double team one guy and the other guy's open, or if you're focusing on both of them, somebody like Jalen Sargent or Jackson Holman, somebody Michael Fitzgerald on the outside can, on some one-on-one coverage, probably break a deep ball or two throughout the game.
Now, switching over to the Wyoming defense, obviously that unit was really, really good for the first 2 weeks, kind of allowing 7 total points through 2 games. And this last week, like you said, giving up 31. Could have been worse with some of the missed opportunities from Utah in the first half. But if you look at like the total yards, Utah was able to kind of run at will against this Wyoming team, just kind of which is it's probably somewhere in the middle for these two, for that unit, kind of going off the first 2 weeks against lesser competition, like you said, and then obviously a really, really good Utah rushing attack led by Devin Dampier. Obviously, one that Wyoming's probably familiar with seeing Dampier in the Mountain West, but I mean that Utah offensive line's got 2 future NFL tackles leading the way. So just is this Wyoming defense probably somewhere in the middle of what we've seen through the first 3 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's more closer to how they played the first 2 games, just from just what the tape that they've been able to put out. I mean, you look at the second half against Utah. I mean, that defense played somewhere around 45 plays in the first half. So when you get to the fourth quarter, I think Utah's offense ended up running, I think, like 86, 87 plays in that game. So I mean, at that point, like, you can have depth, but when you're playing almost 90 plays on defense, you lose the time of possession battle by 11 minutes, which is not the winning formula for a Wyoming team. I think it's somewhere probably closer to what we saw against Northern Iowa and Akron. And I think a good baseline for that will be this weekend with how they're able to I'm assuming Kaidon Salter is going to be the guy for Colorado. And if that's the case, I mean, he has the ability to use his legs just like Dampier. And I mean, Devin Dampier, like he had 90 yards and he was pretty efficient on the ground, but I feel like he more hurt them with them having to respect him running than him actually running. So I'm kind of curious what Colorado is kind of able to do, just in terms of, I know they've struggled running the ball, just traditional running back running the ball. So that's been a strength for Wyoming's defense over the last couple of years. And that really should start with, they have a really good core group of linebackers that have been playing much better than really anybody expected.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this Colorado offense even looks like this week. Obviously, there's been a lot of criticisms of Pat Shurmur and the play calling and the quarterback carousel, which really hasn't made a ton of sense. Like, I thought Kaidon Salter was fine against Georgia Tech. I didn't think he was bad in terms of what I expected from him going into the game. Like I said, it was a 1-score game until the end. Haynes King kind of breaks off the long run right before the 2-minute drill that Colorado just isn't able to force overtime or win the game. So I'm not surprised with how that game went. And then right after that, they open up the competition essentially, for what reason I'm not really sure. And then Salter leads them to 10 points on the first 2 drives against Delaware. And then you get whatever happens after that with Lewis coming in, Juju Lewis coming in, the 5-star freshman, not really doing anything. And then Ryan Staub comes in and kind of lights the world on fire for 4 drives. And then he's the guy for 1 week at least. And now, like you said, it is going to be Salter this week by all indications. And like you said, it's another a quarterback that can run the ball. Part of the reason Salter, I think, got benched after the Delaware game was due to the fact that they didn't think he ran the ball as much as maybe he could have. So I'll be interested to see what the CU offense looks like, how balanced it is, all that kind of stuff, because there's been some struggles in the passing game more than just the quarterbacks. Like, there's been some drops by the wide receivers and everything, just nobody being really on the same page. So this is going to be this will be a measuring stick, I think, for the Buffs offense as well, going against a pretty solid Wyoming defense that is comparable to the ones they saw against Georgia Tech and Houston, at least, as well. Like, the Buffs have to get some momentum going at some point offensively, and this Wyoming game will be a big test for this team. Like, how eager do you feel like Wyoming will be to set the tone defensively and really take control of this game on that end of the ball?
Yeah, I think it starts with the defensive line, and they've kind of proven that. I mean, obviously, like I said, Akron is Akron, and then Northern Iowa is FCS. I get that part of the equation, but they've been really good at causing pressure, obviously not against Utah's offensive line, as you talked about. But I think I know Colorado's kind of struggled in the protection aspect of their offense, and I think that's something that the Cowboys can really exploit this weekend, just in terms of blitzing and making whoever is the quarterback uncomfortable and getting off their spot. They've been really good about situational blitzing and getting off the field. They led the country last year in third down defense, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're up there again, just with the way that things are kind of trending. And then another kind of side note, a quirky little thing is I think 18 of these guys on Wyoming's roster are from Colorado, so you kind of wonder if that's a little. I mean, I'm sure for a lot of them it's a little extra motivation. It's like when Wyoming and CSU play, it's kind of the same thing where you talk to a lot of these guys that grew up in the backyard of CU and CSU and didn't get the time of day, so they head up to Laramie, Wyoming, and then end up in these games against the guys that really didn't want them. So I'm curious to see if any of these Colorado guys can maybe step up and make some plays against those schools.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, with today's coaching staff, I mean, it's not really all that rare to see a team come to Boulder with more Colorado guys than the Buffs have. They only have a handful, really. Only a couple of them are even on scholarship as well. So, I mean, Wyoming, CSU, those teams, Air Force, when they play CU, they always show up with more Colorado kids than the Buffs have. I mean, even I did a story last year when Kansas State came to Boulder. They had like 7 or 8 scholarship players from Colorado, and that was like triple what the Buffs had. They had like 2 last year. So it's certainly a really interesting dynamic, like you said. And last thing before we get to predictions for this game, just how important is this game for Wyoming going forward the rest of the way? Because obviously they have the bye next week, and then that leads into Mountain West play when they have 2 home games to start that with UNLV and San Jose State. I mean, this is their only. They only had one flight game until the middle of. Or until November, even, because they have Air Force as well at some point in October. So the Akron game was the only one out of the Mountain Time Zone for this team until November. Like I said, how important will this game be to kind of set up everything they want to do going into Mountain West play?
Yeah, I think this game is probably a lot more important in terms of your entire season, probably to Colorado than
for sure
to Wyoming. But I think, like you said, I think Wyoming has historically proven to play well against Power 4 teams for the majority of the time. And I think this is an opportunity where you're not taking a trip to Arizona State in August or, Austin, Texas, where you're 4 touchdown underdogs. I mean, this is a pretty close spread just in terms of where these 2 programs were at last year and now where they are at now. So I think just in terms of importance, I mean, this is obviously a chance for Wyoming to kind of prove that Utah is a very good team, because we're not going to lose this bad again.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's irresponsible to say like Utah is probably better than Colorado right now. So I think
we're going to find out at the end of October, and I think Utah is going to be a pretty decent favorite in that game by the time that one rolls around. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think just in terms of momentum, and they have a bye week after this game, so I think going into the season, I mean, I don't think anybody would have been shocked. Like if you would have looked at the schedule, you just said, they would be 2-2 going into conference play. So I think if you're able to, what they were able to do 2 years ago when they beat Texas Tech, when that was their 9-win season. And so I think if you're able to maybe steal one of these games that you're not supposed to win, because they won the 2 games they're supposed to win, they lost the game they weren't supposed to win, and now here's another one where on paper they're not supposed to win. And I think that just the spread kind of indicates how close this matchup might actually be.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a low scoring kind of knockout punch kind of game. Who can, like, the turnovers, all of that kind of stuff, wacky plays, and everything is going to make a difference in a game like this. Appreciate you taking the time to do this, Alex. Just right before you go, just how do you think this game will go? And if you got a score prediction, I'm happy to hear it.
I think it's going to be somewhere like you said. I mean, maybe like 24-21, 17, something like that. 24-17. I think it's going to be a 1-score game. I think Colorado. I would be irresponsible to not pick Colorado, but I do think I tweeted something out when I was watching that Houston game. I mean, Colorado looks beatable, and that's not just from Wyoming perspective, I mean, I just think that they kind of look susceptible to certain defenses, and obviously with the quarterback situation, who really knows what kind of flow that this offense is able to get in, especially if Wyoming's defense plays up to the caliber that's capable of. So I think Wyoming's able to stay in the game. I'm not really sure where this offense is, and I'm not sure how this offense is going to match up against Colorado's defense. So I'm sticking with a one-score game, but I think Colorado probably pulls out in the end at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go 20-13 Buffs. I think I agree with you. I think it'll be even lower scoring. I just think both teams are going to really lean into run this week, like you said, with the trio of backs that Wyoming has and the offensive line they've got. I think they'll see some advantages on tape that they can take, that they can use against this Buffs defensive line that has struggled to have good gap discipline and all that kind of stuff. They really have been they were getting pushed off the line against Delaware at times in that game too. So I think Wyoming's able to control the game at times, and they'll get a couple scoring drives going. But I think the Buffs will try to really, I think they'll use a lot of this game to just try to get in a rhythm and try to develop an identity offensively, because they just haven't had one yet. And this is the last non-conference game before a pretty grueling Big 12 schedule begins next week, starting with BYU. So I think this will be an important game for the Buffs to get on schedule. And even if it doesn't look pretty, I think you just want to come out of this game feeling like you have an identity from a CU perspective. So I think they'll be able to do that with Salter at quarterback, running the ball a little bit more effectively, and I think they'll be able to pull away at the end for a 20-13 win, because I think if you're just able to jump out to a lead against this Wyoming team, I mean, and force them into passing situations, I feel like that's the biggest recipe for success, and I think that's something Colorado will be able to do in the second half of this game. So that's what I'm going to go with. So appreciate you taking the time to do this, Alex, and I'll see you in the press box on Saturday night.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'll see you there. Appreciate it.
All right, that'll do it from today's video. Like I said, once again, appreciate Alex Taylor from YO Sports for coming on to preview this game. Thanks, everybody, for watching. As always, make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. And we'll be back on Saturday night, late Saturday night, probably actually early Sunday morning by the time I'm on the field recording the post-game video from Colorado, Wyoming. So thanks, everybody, again for watching, and stay tuned for what's next.